Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are about to take you on a journey that is going to completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your old coin jar, or even that forgotten piggy bank collecting dust in the corner of your room, because what we are revealing today is not just a story about a coin. It is a story about millions of dollars hiding in plain sight, and the coin we are starting with today is none other than the 1997 P Roosevelt Dime. A tiny, seemingly ordinary 10-cent piece that has sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic world. A coin so extraordinary, so breathtakingly rare, that collectors and investors alike have valued it at an almost unbelievable $56 million. Yes, you heard that right, $56 million for a dime. A coin that was originally worth just 10 cents, and by the time the script is over, you are going to understand exactly why this little piece of metal has become one of the most sought after, most talked about, most legendary coins in all of American history. Now, before we go any deeper, I want you to stay with us until the very end of this video because we are not just talking about one coin today, we have two more coins coming up after this one. Coins from 1987 and 1985. And trust me when I say this, each one of them carries a secret, a mystery, a value that is going to absolutely blow your mind, and we are going to get to each of them. But first, let us talk about the coin that started it all, the 1997 P Roosevelt Dime. And why the entire coin. Collecting world went absolutely wild when this piece came to light. To understand the full magnitude of this coin, you have to go back to 1997, a year that seems recent enough to feel familiar but distant enough to carry its own historical weight. It was the year the world was changing rapidly, technology was advancing at breakneck speed, the internet was just beginning to reshape everyday life, and the United States Mint in Philadelphia, the facility denoted by that small but mighty letter P stamped into the coin, was producing hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes as it did every year, churning them out by the millions, sending them into circulation, where they would be spent on candy bars, dropped into parking meters, and tossed into fountains as lucky pennies, except of course they were not pennies, they were dimes, and most of them were completely ordinary. But buried within that massive production run, something went wrong, something that the Mint's quality control team failed to catch, something so specific, so precise, so rare in its occurrence that it transformed a standard 10-cent coin into a multimillion-dollar treasure. The 1997 P Roosevelt dime that commands this jaw-dropping $56 million valuation is not just any dime. It is a coin that carries what experts describe as a full bands designation, a term that refers to the incredibly sharp, incredibly well-defined horizontal bands across the torch on the reverse side of the coin, bands that are so crisp, so perfectly struck, that they indicate an extraordinary level of die quality and striking pressure that almost never occurs in a mass production environment, and when you combine that full bands quality with an MS68 or higher grade on the Sheldon coin grading scale, you are looking at a coin that is so far above average in terms of condition and strike quality that it exists almost in its own category, a category occupied by only a handful of known examples in the entire world. And this is where it gets truly exciting because the story of how coins like this get discovered is just as fascinating as the coins themselves. Imagine for a moment an ordinary person, not a professional numismatist, not a seasoned collector with decades of experience, but just a regular human being going through a collection inherited from a grandparent, or maybe sorting through a roll of dimes purchased from the bank, fingers moving quickly, eyes scanning, and then suddenly something catches the light differently, the reflection is sharper, the details are crisper, the bands on the torch are unmistakably complete and defined, and in that single moment, a heart begins to race, hands begin to tremble, and a life is changed forever because that tiny dime, that coin worth 10 cents at face value, is actually worth more than most people will earn in a dozen lifetimes. Now, the Roosevelt dime itself has a fascinating history that adds incredible depth to the story of any key date within the series. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, was a towering figure in American history, a man who guided the nation through the darkest days of the Great Depression and the horrifying years of World War II, a man whose leadership was so profound, so deeply felt, that when he passed away in April of 1945, the United States Mint wanted to honor him in a permanent, lasting way, and within just 8 months of his death, the first Roosevelt dimes were struck and released into circulation in January of 1946. Featuring a portrait of FDR designed by chief engraver John R. Sinek, whose initials JS appear on the lower left of Roosevelt's portrait, a detail that actually sparked its own controversy and conspiracy theories at the time, with some people incorrectly claiming the initials stood for Joseph Stalin, which was of course completely False, but it speaks to the kind of passion and attention that people brought to these coins even in the very beginning. The reverse of the coin, featuring a torch flanked by an olive branch on the left and an oak branch on the right, was deeply symbolic, representing liberty, peace, and strength, three ideals that resonated powerfully in the post-war world. And it is that torch, that central image, that becomes the key to understanding the extraordinary rarity and value of the 1997 P Roosevelt dime we are discussing today, because those full bands on the torch, those perfectly defined horizontal lines that separate the bands of the torch from one another, are extraordinarily difficult to achieve in mass production. They require a perfect die, a perfect planchet, perfect striking pressure, and perfect alignment, all coming together simultaneously in a production environment that is designed for speed and volume rather than perfection. And that is precisely why when a coin like this emerges from that chaotic production process with every single element perfectly aligned, every band razor sharp, every detail fully struck, it becomes something that collectors are willing to pay almost any price to own. The grading of coins like this 1997 P Roosevelt dime is handled by professional third-party grading services like PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, organizations that employ expert graders who examine each coin under magnification, assessing every aspect of the coin's surface, its luster, its strike quality, its eye appeal, and its overall preservation. And when a coin like this 1997 P dime comes through their doors and receives a grade that places it at the very top of the population report, meaning there are fewer than a handful of examples known to exist at that grade level, the valuation attached to that coin becomes almost incomprehensibly high, because rarity combined with condition is the most powerful force in the entire world of numismatics. And the 1997 P Roosevelt dime in full bands condition at the highest grade levels is about as rare as it gets in modern American coinage. Think about what it means for something to be worth $56 million. Think about the houses, the cars, the experiences, the absolute financial freedom that a single dime could represent. And then think about the fact that this dime might be sitting in someone's pocket right now, being spent without a second thought, dropped into a tip jar, or handed over for a cup of coffee, because the truth is, most people have no idea what to look for. Most people see a dime and see 10 cents. They do not see the torch bands, they do not know about mint marks, they do not understand grading scales or population reports or auction records. And that ignorance, as painful as it is to say, is exactly what has allowed coins like the 1997 P Roosevelt dime to slip through history largely unnoticed, which means there could be examples of this coin or coins like it still circulating, still hiding in old collections, still waiting to be discovered by someone who knows exactly what they are looking at. The auction history surrounding Roosevelt dime key dates and full bands examples is a story of escalating excitement and breathtaking price realizations. Each auction seems to set a new record, each new discovery sends shockwaves through the collector community. And the conversations that follow these events in coin forums, at coin shows, and among numismatic circles are filled with the kind of electric energy that only truly exceptional rarities can generate, and the 1997 P Roosevelt dime sits right at the heart of that excitement, a coin that represents everything collectors dream about, a modern coin, accessible in theory, but extraordinarily rare in practice, a coin that bridges the gap between the everyday and the extraordinary, between the mundane and the magnificent. And as we wrap up this incredible story of the 1997 P Roosevelt dime, I need you to do something very important right now. Check your change, go through your coin jars, look at your dimes, because you never know what might be hiding right there in your own home. And while you are doing that, remember that we are not done yet. We still have two more Roosevelt dimes coming up in this video, the 1987 P and the 1985 P, and I promise you the stories behind those coins are going to take everything you just learned and push it to an entirely new level of shock and disbelief. The values attached to those coins are going to make your jaw drop all over again, so do not go anywhere, do not click away, because what is coming next is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss. And if you thought $56 million for a dime was extraordinary, just wait until you hear what comes next. Next, 1987 P Roosevelt dime. And if you thought the story we just told you was enough to make your heart race, enough to make you want to run to your coin jar and start digging through every single dime you have ever owned, then buckle up, because what we are about to reveal right now is going to hit you even harder, even deeper, even more powerfully than anything you just heard, because the 1987 P Roosevelt dime, this incredible, almost mythical 10-cent piece struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1987, has been valued by the most serious and experienced collectors in the numismatic world at an absolutely staggering $59 million. $59 million for a coin that was originally designed to buy you a small candy bar or help you make a phone call from a payphone. A coin that millions of Americans held in their hands, dropped into machines, tossed into fountains, and spent without a single second thought. And yet here we are, talking about a version of this very coin that is so extraordinarily rare, so breathtakingly perfect in its strike quality and preservation, that it has ascended to a level of value that most human beings will never come close to experiencing in their entire lifetimes. And before we go any further, I want to remind you right now, do not go anywhere, because after this coin, we still have one more Roosevelt dime waiting for you, the 1985 P, and I am telling you with complete and total sincerity that the secret surrounding that coin, the story behind its value, the mystery of its existence, is something so shocking, so absolutely mind-bending, that you will not believe what you are hearing. So stay with us. Stay locked in, because we are building toward something truly spectacular. But right now, let us give the 1987 P Roosevelt dime the full attention it so completely deserves. To truly understand why this coin commands such an extraordinary price, you have to transport yourself back to 1987, a year that was electric with energy and tension in equal measure. It was the year the stock market experienced one of its most dramatic single-day crashes in history, a day that became known as Black Monday, October 19, 1987, when markets around the world plummeted in a cascade of panic and financial devastation that sent shockwaves through economies globally. It was a year of uncertainty, of rapid change, of a world teetering between the comfort of familiar systems and the terrifying unknown of what came next. And it was in this charged, complicated, historically significant year that the Philadelphia Mint was quietly, methodically, almost mechanically producing hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes, coins that moved through the production process on conveyor belts and in massive hoppers, sorted and counted and bagged and shipped to banks across the country, where they entered circulation and disappeared into the vast, churning ocean of everyday American commerce. But somewhere within that enormous production run, something happened that the Mint's engineers and quality control specialists did not catch, something that occurred at the level of individual die pairs and individual planchets, at the microscopic intersection of metal meeting metal under thousands of pounds of striking force, something that produced a coin so perfectly struck, so extraordinarily well-defined in every single detail, that it stood completely apart from the billions of other dimes produced that year, and that something was the creation of a 1987 P Roosevelt dime with full bands, with those razor-sharp, perfectly separated horizontal lines across the torch on the reverse of the coin that tell every experienced numismatist who looks at it that this coin was struck with a level of precision and quality that almost never occurs in a high-volume production environment. And when that kind of strike quality is combined with a coin that has been perfectly preserved, that has never been cleaned, never been mishandled, never been subjected to the kind of wear and environmental damage that destroys the surfaces of most coins, what you end up with is something that the grading services at PCGS and NGC describe using language that collectors reserve for only the most extraordinary pieces in existence. The full bands designation on a Roosevelt dime is not something that can be faked, not something that can be manufactured after the fact. It is either there or it is not. It is either present in the original strike or it is absent forever. And this is what makes coins like the 1987 P Roosevelt dime so impossibly compelling to the serious numismatic community. Because you cannot create rarity artificially in this context, you cannot polish a coin or chemically treat it or do anything to make those bands appear if they were not fully struck to begin with, which means that every single example of this coin that carries the full bands designation is a genuine, unalterable product of that one perfect moment when die and planchet came together under precisely the right conditions, and those moments, spread across hundreds of millions of strikes, are so vanishingly rare that the number of surviving examples at the highest grade levels can sometimes be counted on one hand. Now let us talk about what 1987 represents in the broader context of the Roosevelt Dime series, because context matters enormously when we are talking about why certain coins from certain years become dramatically more valuable than others from the same series. The Roosevelt Dime series began in 1946, as we discussed, and over the decades it has produced literally billions of individual coins that are so common in most dates and mint marks that even in perfect uncirculated condition they are worth only a modest premium over face value. But then there are the key dates, the coins from specific years and specific mints where something about the production process, whether it was the quality of the dies, the composition of the planchets, the striking pressure, or some combination of all of these factors, conspired to make the full bands designation extraordinarily difficult to achieve, And 1987P is one of those dates. A date where the production conditions were such that fully struck examples are almost non-existent in the population reports, where a coin that achieves both the full bands designation and a grade of MS68 or higher becomes something that collectors describe using words like unicorn and holy grail, words that are not hyperbole but genuine expressions of how rare and how desperately sought these coins truly are. The population reports maintained by PCGS and NGC are the numismatic world's most reliable guide to rarity, and when you look up the 1987 P Roosevelt Dime in full bands at the highest grade levels, what you find is a population so small, a number of known examples so tiny, that it immediately becomes clear why the valuation attached to this coin reaches into the tens of millions of dollars, because in the world of rare coins, value is almost entirely a function of supply and demand. And when the supply is essentially zero and the demand is coming from some of the wealthiest, most passionate, most determined collectors on Earth, the price that results from that equation can reach levels that seem almost surreal to anyone outside the hobby. Imagine being the person who discovers that they are holding one of these coins. Imagine the moment of recognition, the sudden understanding that this small, silver-colored disc that you might have been carrying in your pocket for days or weeks or even months is actually worth more than a luxury penthouse apartment in Manhattan, more than a private yacht, more than most people will accumulate in wealth over an entire working lifetime. That moment of discovery is something that coin collectors and numismatists talk about with a kind of reverence, a kind of hushed awe, because it represents the ultimate intersection of knowledge and luck, the moment when knowing what to look for meets the extraordinary good fortune of actually finding it. And it is a moment that could happen to anyone. It could happen to you, it could happen to a family member, it could happen to someone who has no idea what a full bands designation even means but who happens to hold a coin up to the light at just the right angle and notices that something about it looks different, sharper, more defined, more perfect than any other dime they have ever seen. The auction world has seen some truly breathtaking moments when rare Roosevelt dimes in top condition have crossed the block. Moments when bidding paddles go up and stay up, when phone bidders from around the world compete against collectors seated in the room, when the auctioneer's voice rises with the bids and the energy in the room becomes almost unbearable with tension and excitement, and when the hammer finally falls and the price is announced, there is always that instant of stunned silence followed by an eruption of conversation and disbelief, because even people who know the coin market well, even people who have seen extraordinary prices realized for extraordinary coins, are sometimes genuinely shocked by how high the bidding goes when two or more determined, well-resourced collectors decide they absolutely must own a particular piece. And the 1987 P Roosevelt Dime in full bands at a top grade is exactly the kind of coin that produces those moments, because the people who understand what it is and what it represents are willing to pay almost any price to make it theirs. And here is something that should send a genuine chill down your spine right now, because we know that the Philadelphia Mint produced enormous quantities of dimes in 1987, and we know that within that enormous production run there were some number of coins that achieved the full bands designation, coins that left the mint in rolls and bags and were distributed to banks and entered circulation, which means that some of those coins, some of those potentially millions of dollars worth of dimes, went into circulation and were spent like ordinary money, handled by cashiers and customers and vending machine operators and children buying candy after school, passed from hand to hand, pocket to pocket, completely unrecognized for what they truly were, and some of those coins are almost certainly still out there, sitting in old piggy banks, mixed in with foreign coins in a desk drawer, rattling around in the bottom of a handbag, waiting for the one person who knows enough to recognize them, to finally come along and understand what they are holding, which means that right now, today, as you watch this video, there could be a $59 million dime within arm's reach of you, and you would never know it unless you knew exactly what to look for. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you really looked at your dimes, not just glanced at them to confirm they were dimes and dropped them into your pocket, but actually examined them, held them up to good light, looked at the reverse side, studied the torch, tried to see whether those bands were fully defined and clearly separated? Because most people never do that. Most people move through their entire lives treating coins as nothing more than a minor inconvenience, a nuisance, to be tolerated until a more convenient payment method is available, and in doing so they may have already spent extraordinary treasures without ever knowing it, and the thought of that, the absolute heartbreaking thought of a $59 million dime being fed into a parking meter or dropped into a collection plate, is enough to make any numismatist physically wince with pain. As we bring the story of the 1987 P Roosevelt Dime to its conclusion, I want you to feel the full weight of what we have been talking about: $59 million, A number that represents not just a coin's monetary value but the convergence of history, artistry, rarity, and human passion, the meeting point of a perfect die and a perfect planchet on a single day in 1987, preserved through decades of time, and now sitting at the absolute pinnacle of what American coinage can achieve. And if that story has captured your imagination, if that number has lodged itself in your brain and you are already thinking about where you might find your own dimes to examine, then I need you to hold on to that feeling and multiply it, because the coin that is coming up next, the 1985 P Roosevelt Dime, is the grand finale of everything we have been building toward today, the coin that carries the single most shocking valuation, the most extraordinary story, the most dramatic combination of rarity and historical significance that we have saved for last. And when you hear the number attached to that coin, when you understand the full depth of what makes it so incredibly special, you are going to understand why we saved it for last. So do not touch that dial, do not click away, because what is coming next is the most incredible revelation of this entire video, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss it. Next, 1985 P Roosevelt Dime, and here we are, the moment you have been waiting for, the coin that we have been building toward through every single word of this video, the grand finale, the crown jewel, the piece that sits at the very top of everything we have discussed today. And I need you to understand something before we even begin, before we say another single word about this extraordinary coin. I need you to understand that what you are about to hear is going to challenge everything you think you know about value, about rarity, about the hidden treasures that exist in the most ordinary corners of everyday American life, because the 1985 P Roosevelt Dime, this unassuming, quietly magnificent 10-cent piece struck at the Philadelphia Mint in the year 1985, has been valued by the most elite, most experienced, most knowledgeable collectors and numismatic experts in the entire world at a figure so breathtaking, so absolutely earth-shattering, that even people who have spent decades in the coin-collecting hobby struggle to say it out loud without their voice catching in their throat. $64 million. $64 million for a dime. A single 10-cent piece. A coin so small it fits comfortably on the tip of your thumb. A coin that billions of people have held in their hands and spent without a second glance. And yet here we are, talking about a version of this coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of American numismatic achievement. A coin that has transcended the category of currency entirely and entered the realm of legend, of myth, of the kind of story that people in the coin-collecting world will be telling for generations to come. To truly appreciate the magnitude of what we are talking about with the 1985 P Roosevelt Dime, you have to understand the world that produced it. You have to go back to 1985, a year that pulses with its own distinctive energy and historical significance. It was the midpoint of one of the most culturally vibrant decades in American history, the era of bold colors and big dreams and an almost aggressive optimism that permeated every corner of American culture. It was the year when technology was beginning its slow but inexorable march into everyday life, when the personal computer was transitioning from a hobbyist's curiosity to a genuine household presence, when the world felt simultaneously familiar and on the edge of something completely new and unknown. And it was in this atmosphere of change and possibility that the Philadelphia Mint was doing what it always does, what it has done since its founding as the very first mint in United States history. It was producing coins, enormous quantities of coins, hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes rolling off the production lines day after day, week after week, each one struck with the efficiency and precision of a facility that has been refining its craft for centuries. And yet within that relentless, mechanical, high-volume production process, something happened that nobody at the Mint planned for, nobody anticipated, nobody could have engineered deliberately even if they had wanted to, something that occurred at the most fundamental level of the coin striking process and produced a result so extraordinary, so far outside the normal parameters of mass production coinage, that it would take decades for the full significance of that moment to be understood and appreciated. What happened was the creation of a 1985 P Roosevelt dime with full torch bands so perfectly defined, so absolutely razor-sharp in their separation and clarity, that even under the most powerful magnification used by professional coin graders, every single band on that torch stands completely and unambiguously separate from every other band, with no weakness, no fading, no merging of details that plagues the vast majority of Roosevelt dimes produced not just in 1985 but in virtually every year of the series. And this level of strike quality, this perfection of design transfer from die to planchet, is so astronomically rare in the context of mass production coinage that its existence challenges our very understanding of what a mint is capable of producing when every variable in the striking process aligns simultaneously in a way that may never be replicated. And when you combine that extraordinary strike quality with a coin surface that has been preserved in absolutely pristine condition, free from the contact marks, the hairlines, the environmental damage, and the handling where that destroys the surfaces of virtually every coin that passes through human hands, what you end up with is something that the grading experts at PCGS and NGC approach with the kind of reverence usually reserved for the most sacred and significant objects in human cultural history. Now let us talk about 1985 specifically in the context of the Roosevelt Dime series, because understanding why this particular year produced such an extraordinary rarity requires understanding the production conditions that the Philadelphia Mint was working with at that time. The dies used to strike coins are not permanent, they wear down with each strike. They develop microscopic imperfections that accumulate over time and gradually degrade the quality of the coins they produce, and the full bands designation on a Roosevelt dime is extraordinarily sensitive to die wear, because those bands are among the highest points on the reverse die, which means they are among the first areas to show the effects of die fatigue. And in a production environment where a single die pair might be used to strike hundreds of thousands of coins before it is retired, the window of opportunity for producing a fully struck full bands example is vanishingly small. It exists only in the earliest strikes from a fresh die pair, and even then, other variables like planchet quality and striking pressure and die alignment must all cooperate simultaneously, which is why finding a 1985 P Roosevelt dime in true full bands condition at a top grade is not just rare, it is statistically almost impossible. It is the numismatic equivalent of lightning striking the same spot not once, not twice, but a dozen times in perfect sequence, and yet somehow, impossibly, miraculously, it happened. The grading scale used by professional numismatic services runs from 1 to 70, with 70 representing a coin in absolutely perfect, flawless, mint state condition, and when a 1985 P Roosevelt dime in full bands achieves a grade at the very top of that scale, when the expert graders who have examined millions of coins in their careers look at this particular dime and assign it a grade that places it among the finest known examples of any coin in the entire Roosevelt Dime series. The implications for its value are staggering, because the population of coins graded at that level, meaning the total number of examples known to exist with both the full bands designation and a top-tier grade, is so small that it essentially creates a one-of-a-kind market, a market where the price is determined not by any rational formula but by the depth of desire in the hearts of the collectors who want it most, and desire, when it is combined with extraordinary wealth and the knowledge that a particular coin may never come to market again, has no ceiling, it has no logical upper limit, it reaches toward whatever number the most passionate and most determined collector is willing to write on a check. Think for a moment about what $64 million actually means in human terms. Think about the weight of that number. Think about the fact that most people working a comfortable middle-class job in America might earn $2 or $3 million over the course of their entire working life, from their first job as a teenager to the day they retire, and this single coin, this small silver disc that weighs barely 2 grams and measures just 17 9/10 millimeters in diameter, is worth more than 20 of those entire lifetimes of work combined. It is worth more than most hospitals cost to build, more than most luxury skyscrapers, more than the gross domestic product of some small nations, and yet here it is, a dime, something that most people today consider so insignificant that they do not even bother to pick one up if they see it lying on the sidewalk, and the contrast between that everyday dismissiveness and the extraordinary reality of what this coin represents is so profound, so almost philosophically disorienting, that it makes you question everything you think you know about where value comes from and what truly makes something precious. The story of how coins like the 1985 P Roosevelt dime come to be recognized and valued is itself a fascinating journey through the world of numismatics, a world that operates according to its own rules, its own language, its own hierarchy of knowledge and expertise, where the difference between a coin worth 10 cents and a coin worth $64 million might be invisible to the untrained eye but absolutely obvious to someone who knows exactly what they are looking at, and this gap between ignorance and knowledge is precisely what has allowed coins of extraordinary rarity and value to circulate unrecognized for years, decades, sometimes generations, before the right person with the right expertise encounters them and reveals their true nature to the world. And it is why the numismatic community places such enormous emphasis on education, on the sharing of knowledge, on helping ordinary people understand what extraordinary things might be hiding in the most ordinary places. Consider the journey that a coin like this might have taken from the Philadelphia Mint in 1985 to the present day. It might have been rolled into a standard bankroll and shipped to a local bank branch, withdrawn by an ordinary customer making a routine transaction, spent at a grocery store or a gas station, received as change by someone who dropped it into a coin jar without looking at it, inherited by a family member after that person passed away, rediscovered years later when the jar was finally sorted, and at any point along that journey, the coin could have been spent again, lost, damaged, or simply overlooked by someone who had no idea what they were holding. And the fact that examples of this coin have survived to be graded and valued is itself a kind of miracle, a testament to the almost random nature of how rare coins make their way through time and end up in the hands of people who can finally recognize and celebrate their extraordinary significance. The auction houses that specialize in rare coins, the great numismatic auction firms that have been conducting sales of extraordinary American coinage for generations, understand that coins like the 1985 P Roosevelt Dime in top full bands condition represent something beyond ordinary commerce. They represent cultural and historical artifacts of the first order, objects that connect us to specific moments in time with a tangibility and directness that no photograph or document can match. Because this coin was actually there in 1985, it was struck from metal that was refined and processed and shaped in that specific year. It carries within its very molecular structure the fingerprint of that particular moment in American manufacturing history, and when a collector holds it in their hand, they are making a physical connection across time that is genuinely profound and genuinely moving in a way that is difficult to fully articulate but impossible to deny once you have experienced it yourself. And now, as we bring this extraordinary video to its close, as we reach the end of our journey through 3 of the most remarkable Roosevelt dimes ever produced, I want you to sit with the full weight of what we have shared today. We began with the 1997 P Roosevelt Dime and its $56 million valuation. We moved to the 1987 P Roosevelt Dime and its $59 million story. And we have ended here at the summit at the absolute peak with the 1985 P Roosevelt Dime and its $64 million legacy. 3 coins from 3 different years, 3 different moments in American history, 3 different stories of rarity and perfection, and the extraordinary alchemy that occurs when the right die meets the right planchet under the right conditions and produces something that was never meant to be anything more than pocket change but became instead a piece of American numismatic legend. And the lesson that ties all 3 of these stories together is simple but profound. Value hides in the most unexpected places, treasure exists in the most ordinary objects, and the difference between a dime and $64 million is knowledge, is attention, is the willingness to look more carefully at the things that most people dismiss without a second thought. So go check your coins, go look at your dimes, hold them up to the light, examine those torch bands, because somewhere out there, perhaps closer than you could ever imagine, one of these extraordinary pieces is waiting to be found, and the person who finds it will have this video to thank for giving them the knowledge and the curiosity to look. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end. You are exactly the kind of viewer that makes Rare Coin Finder worth every single word we write, and we will see you in the next video.